It strikes at a time of grief and mourning, as if to mock death and any hope of a hereafter.
Hello YouTube! I am Thorstein from Cinema Terror, and yeah, I have no idea what I watched, but it's called Crystal Force. I went into this totally blind, without even reading the back of the DVD. I know the title was Crystal Force, and that it was distributed by Troma. With a title like that and this cover, I figured I would get a fantasy horror film, and I guess that was the intent of the film. It's very hard to say what the hell Crystal Force is all about, as I've now watched this film twice, still failing to try to make any sense of it at all. Bear with me while I try to explain this as coherent as possible. Crystal Force starts out at a graveyard where someone is being buried. It goes right next to a long walk with two of the main characters, the wife of the deceased and the daughter Beth. And I'm not kidding at all. This walk lasts for several minutes with no dialogue at all. Basically just being a total time waster, and that's not how you set up your movie. They finally get to the house where a gathering has arrived to show their respect for the deceased, and we get to become familiar with some of the leading females here, by them talking about what's going on in their life. It's all awful dialogue and boring as hell, making you wish that some type of Crystal Force does come into play, but it won't. Some days go by and the widow is now living at the daughter's house while she gets back on her feet. Beth and one of her friends come across an old antique store where they find a crystal thingy.
Crystals radiate and reflect, attract and repel. There are some who say they hold secrets only time will tell.
They get a quick lesson of the crystal from the odd store owner and finally buys the thing for half the suggested price.
$50.
50? Sold. Beth, you're supposed to bargain with him. It's okay.
This was meant for you. $25.
Who said anything about not depending upon the kindness of a stranger?
Beth presents the crystal to her mother while she's having a visit from her friend and a local priest. Here is where we first see the true force of the crystal, with terrible special effects.
Are you alright?
Force of the crystal comes out and scares the priest, wanting him to get out of the house. So basically, there is an evil satanic force within the crystal, with the store owner apparently controlling it somehow, always coming up watching events that take place while he speaks in riddles and laughs hysterically. The presence of the crystal makes the daughter have some really sexually filled strange dreams. And even if they are filled with some pretty weird stuff, we get to see how he gets her off. We are then introduced to more characters, making up for quite the amount of potential victims. Since one of the ladies, Veronica I believe, Chess is able to make contact with the spirit world, they all figure it would be a great way to cheer up the mother by having a seance. Nothing like a seance to get over your dead husband, am I right?
Jack isn't sure we should be getting involved in the seance now. Although I don't know why not.
They go through with it, although it doesn't seem to work or convince them at first try. But after a second night, well, not a lot more happens then either. Time goes by, then there's suddenly only 10 minutes left of the film, so they let loose a creature to cause some havoc. The end. I think. Crystal Force is, if you didn't get my disdain for it already, an incredibly boring movie. I try to avoid just using the word boring on films, as it is an easy word to use when you dislike a film, but it's still a bit of a lazy term to use. But when it comes to Crystal Force, there is just no other way around it. I applaud you if you're able to keep yourself interested in what is going on while watching this, as I find myself falling out of it every 10th minute. Everything is done on the cheap, although that's to be expected, but what's not expected is the lack of attempts to just go for it and have some fun. You could create a fun B-movie even if you have little to work with, but judging by the lack of scenes that actually try to evoke some suspense, it looks to me like they hardly even tried. And I know that's a harsh thing to say, and that some of the ones involved surely did try to do their work, but that's just how the final movie comes off to me. There are some scenes with sexual content, and that turn out to be the most enjoyable ones for my pervy eyes, as the ladies involved are quite nice to look at, but that's the stretch of my enjoyment on this film. I guess there is more focus on female characters and issues than the norm, due to the film basically being nearly all female, same with director Laura Keats, but sadly nothing of it goes anywhere. The dialogue scenes will imply character stuff that should come into play later on, but never does. Crystal Force is the ultimate background noise movie. It is quiet as there's hardly anything going on, and it does let you know when you have to peek up for a few minutes before going on to do whatever your main activities will be at that moment. It's terrible on all levels, and I can't see any audience to recommend this to. Do yourself a favor and stay away from Crystal Force. This film gets the low score of 1 out of 5. That was my rambling about Crystal Force. Have you seen this film? If so, why? I know there is a sequel out there called Crystal Force 2 Dark Angel from 1994. I have to admit that due to lack of actual story in this, I am curious how the hell a sequel was created. Anyway, any feedback would be highly appreciated. Check out my other reviews and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Hope you're having a better movie evening than what I just had, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you.